did much to raise morale in the American Pacific Fleet. Nimitz's personable style of management, plus a remarkable gift for trusting subordinates to do their jobs without interference, would prove crucial in the battle ahead. After Pearl Harbor, it was Chester Nimitz who had realized that the era of the big gun battleship was over, and that the striking power of America's Navy would in future be built around the aircraft carrier. While under Nimitz's direction, America's carrier-building program was accelerated. For the moment, he would have to make do with what he had: just 4 aircraft carriers and their support ships. In spite of his slender resources, Nimitz would stick to the tactical doctrine he had always advocated. For aircraft carriers, attack is the best form of defense. To the Japanese Navy, the outcome of the forthcoming battle was never in doubt. So far, the war had yielded an unbroken string of successes, and the certainty of victory was shared by all ranks. Such was the level of confidence that there was a real fear amongst some flag officers that the Americans would not dare fight and would refuse to leave the safety of Pearl Harbor. One advanced seaplane squadron even sent a signal to its headquarters, requesting that all future mail should be directed to Midway. The results of war games simulating the coming battle were also ignored. When one such game resulted in the intervention of American bombers from Midway Island and the sinking of 2 Japanese carriers, the outcome was deemed unacceptable and was overruled by the umpire. For the massive undertaking that would expand the Japanese Empire and destroy the US Navy in the Pacific, Japan could muster almost its entire combined fleet. All 9 of the fleet's battleships, along with 11 carriers, would take part in the coming operations. Of these, 4 carriers would eventually participate in the Battle of Midway. Akagi, or Red Castle, was laid down as a battle cruiser in 1920. 2 years later, she was converted into an aircraft carrier. In 1934, Akagi was extensively modified to accommodate 30 more aircraft, taking her battle complement to 91. Akagi was one of only 2 carriers ever built, with the bridge on the port side. Kaga, or Increased Joy, was originally laid down as a battleship, but in 1924, work began to convert her to a carrier. She was completed in March 1928. Later, Kaga's triple deck was replaced by a much lengthened single deck in a major refit. Her aircraft capacity was raised from 60 to 90. Soryu, the Green Dragon, was launched in December 1935. Built under the limitations of the Washington Naval Treaty, Soryu was small and cramped. Nevertheless, she could still carry 63 aircraft, and the design was so successful, she was the model for nearly all later Japanese carriers. Hiryu, the Flying Dragon, like Akagi, had her bridge on the port side, Because of the universal tendency of pilots to veer left in an emergency, the design caused many more landing accidents. Hiryu was, however, very much more seaworthy than her predecessors. Her complement of aircraft was 63. The Mitsubishi A6M-0 fighter was the most potent and visible symbol of Japanese prowess in the Pacific War. Purpose-designed as a Navy fighter to operate from land bases and aircraft carriers, the Zero would acquire an awesome reputation. The Zero had a remarkably clean airframe and was very light in weight. The result was high speed and excellent fuel economy. However, these advantages were achieved at the expense of pilot protection. The Zero had no armor and no self-sealing fuel tanks. More Zeros would be built than any other type of Japanese aircraft. The Aichi D3A Val 2-seater was the first all-metal monoplane dive bomber to enter Japanese naval service. In the hands of experts, the Val was a formidable weapon, realizing an 80% strike accuracy during the early Japanese conquests. The Val was so strongly built and so highly maneuverable that even with a fixed, spatted undercarriage, it could become a highly effective fighter once it had dropped its bombs. Although the Nakajima B5N Kate was slow and poorly protected, it was, at the time of Midway, the best aircraft of its type in the world. On its introduction in 1937, it had boasted many advanced features, such as folding wings, a retractable undercarriage, and integral wing fuel tanks. Effective as a conventional bomber, as a torpedo bomber, the Kate was devastating. The aircraft was armed with the excellent Type 91 torpedo. The Type 91 could be dropped at 200 miles per hour and from a height of up to 300 meters. A valuable protection against anti-aircraft fire. The naval pilots preparing for New Guinea and Midway operations were seasoned veterans of the attack on Pearl Harbor. They had gone on to fly combat missions in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. For Japanese pilots, the intervals between combat operations were entirely taken up by training. The motto was train hard, fight easy. Japanese determination to achieve the highest standards in Navy flying had not come without a price. Pilot training was lengthy and expensive. Only 100 naval pilots graduated each year from the training schools. Far too few to cope with the incessant demands placed on Japanese carrier forces. Since the start of the war, there had been no leave for Navy aircrew. The training of Japanese sailors and flight deck personnel was, if anything, even more arduous than that undergone by their pilot comrades. The men were conscripts, hardened by harsh discipline, and ceaseless battle drill meant that a ship could be brought to action stations and a complete strike force launched within 5 minutes. During the heat of battle, a flight could be rearmed, refueled, and airborne again within 1 hour. Although the combat readiness of Japanese sailors and airmen was unsurpassed, there was an underlying weakness in the Navy's preparation for the coming operations. Before Pearl Harbor, aircrew had been able to